Welcome to See What She Can Do Conversations, the podcast. I'm Tina Finelli, and I am here with my co-host, Gina Borger.
Hello, I'm Gina.
Gina is our communications intern, and this is her very first podcast, and we're super excited to have her rock this show. So thanks for joining us, Gina. We also have guests Emily and Judy Renneberg. They are our mother-daughter duo. And we're going to talk today about how when women support women, we can do awesome things in our world. Most importantly, we can make it a kinder, more inclusive place. Emily is an awesome superstar. We've been working with her through See What She Can Do over the last year. She is an active advocate for inclusivity in sport and gender equity. She is a competitive player. She played Ringette for 15 years. She's hosted live broadcasts, and we want to hear all about that. It's super exciting. And she also has her own podcast called Even Strength. So welcome to the show, Emily.
Thank you for having me, Tina and Gina. Really excited to be here today.
And Judy comes to us today from Calgary. We're super excited to have Judy join us from the other side of Canada. And she is also a Ringette player. She's played since she was 10 years old. So she's played a little longer than Emily has. We are mamas. We are both mamas on this side, and we've got all generations of people on this call, so it's super exciting. And Judy is also deeply involved in the Ringette community. We're going to talk a little bit about her leadership there and the kinds of changes she's seen in this really awesome community. And we also know that Judy is a number one cheerleader for Emily in her lifelong pursuit of sport, but also just an active life. So we're grateful for the impact that moms have on their daughters and daughters have on their moms. So we're going to explore that a bit more today too. So welcome to the show, Judy.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's jump right in. Okay, Gina, over to you.
Yes, so to start, I'd like to ask you, Emily, what fueled this passion for sport and community?
Well, Gina, I think part of the reason that I'm still very, very involved in sport is because I've had a connection to it for so long, and it's become a really critical part of the way that I see myself and the way that I interact with my community. I've been playing Ringette, like Tina said, for 15 years and taking a couple of years break on and off in between there. So I'm still very involved in that community, and I think because I love it so much, I want to carry it in different ways. And so that's had a huge impact on my life in, sports-related things, career-related things, school-related things, you name it. And it brings me so much joy. So I love to, still be involved and use my skills in the communities and do what I can to increase sports involvement for everybody.
Absolutely. I love that. So obviously you've mentioned this, Ringette's been a huge part of your life. So what has the impact of Ringette, of sport, in general, had on your life, your career, like where you are right now?
So I've been a player for many, many years, and I've been to 3 national championships. I was on Team Alberta twice. I've done a lot of great things within the sport as a player itself, and that brought me a lot of opportunity to meet new people and travel places across the country and really feel that kind of success. But for me, I think Ringette has really given me a lot of skills outside of that as well. And Tina, you mentioned that I did broadcasting, and when I took a break from Ringette, I still wanted to be involved with sports, but I wanted to do it in a different role. So I found sports broadcasting at Radio Western. So I did varsity hockey. I did lots of articles for other sports, but live commentary was varsity hockey, and I thought that was a really great way to, still maintain my involvement within the sport community, but try something new.
Nice. So you've done broadcasting, and I think you mentioned that the broadcast team that you were on was the first female-led one, right? Which I think that is something.
Yes.
That is something to point out. I think that's incredible. What was it like being a part of that?
So, yeah, great question. So it is true. I was on the all-women's broadcast. It was January 2019. And what was special about that, and not a lot of people know this, because I think not a lot of people just know this in general, is that the entire broadcast was done by women. So everybody that you heard obviously was women, but it was also produced by women. Nice. The social media was done by women, all the photography, everything in the background was also run by women. So there had been broadcasts with on-air talent prior to us being all women, but there had never been something like we've done where every single person identified as a woman. Wow. Which was super special for us because it was, again, a huge moment in broadcast history, in sports. And we even had Caroline, who is the co-founder with Tina, with SeeWhatSheCanDo, show up to that game that we did the broadcast for. It was for Western women's varsity hockey. And it was a really,
and that was
really
pretty hard
cool
because
day.
she's a Queen's graduate, eh? So I had to put my purple Western stuff on her head and say, "Come on, go up." Yeah, anyways, I'm teasing. She had a great time.
We had to drag her into the rink. No, she was awesome. She took photos and did articles for us and really got the excitement up around us because even with this conversation happening, obviously we're talking about women helping each other. That's a really, really great example of that because, if we're doing something, there's obviously an impact, but if other people know that we're doing these things, there's even more of an impact. So having that community and being able to do that was just a super cool experience because you just felt like you were creating a space for somebody. It doesn't matter who it was, but you just felt like you were creating a space for somebody, but also just really exciting as an individual and being like, I'm making something here.
I love that.
Well, and hats off to Radio Western for opening those doors and providing that opportunity. Yeah. And, we're talking about women supporting women, but this is really all of us supporting each other too, right? And that's a prime example of how, they gave you the opportunity to be out there and represent it. And it was pretty exciting for us actually to even cover that story because, what we see there is you're taking steps that haven't been taken before. So you're opening doors for others and showing people that they can do it and that there is an opportunity. And we've seen, people come out of actually Radio Western. You've seen people go on to, host NHL conversations. So we've got professionals that come out of the universities in those programs or in those communities for their professional lives. So it's awesome that you were able to demonstrate to people that it's possible. And I'm wondering if there are others in your life from a mentor standpoint that have maybe shown you where things are possible that you may not have even considered before. So any kind of mentors in your life that have made an impact on you, Emily?
Well, Tina, I think to answer that question, maybe perhaps the definition of mentor kind of confines my answers because I don't think I necessarily have someone who's like a formal mentor who took me through processes, who said, here's what you can achieve, here's what I did, let's work together. But because I've been so involved in sports, specifically Ringette, which is mostly women, I've had a lot of really great people help me get to where I am today in terms of coaching, in terms of competition, in terms of other athletes, administrators, like everybody top to bottom is all working towards a common goal. And I think that had a really big impact. And I'll bring it over to my mom. She's on the administrative side now. She's on the admin side, which she used to coach me for many, many years. I think it was up to, maybe 9 or 10. And after that, she decided 13. To get into 13. And so she decided to get into admin. I'm sure she can tell you this story. But for me, because she was no longer coaching me, but she still had her own team to play for, seeing her move into like an administrative role and work with volunteering and be on boards and be presidents and do all of this stuff administratively, it kind of opened up my eyes to seeing other opportunities that were not just limited to being a player in sports. So that was a big key thing for me, just to see that and understand, okay, well, sports need to run somehow, not just players. Somebody has to do that. And there are other options to sports than just being a player.
Somebody has to do the bottle drive.
It is true, but you have done far more than bottle drive, Judy. I mean, you've run the SO Golden Ring tournament is the largest Ringette tournament is it in North America? Is it in the world? It's a
In the
big
world,
tournament, right?
actually. Yeah,
In
in
the
the
Wow.
world.
world. Yeah.
Yeah. So you are very humble because it is more than just the bottle drive. You've had big impacts on that sport. I'm interested in hearing. I mean, we know the research shows that when moms are active, like their kids are way more likely to be active. I think the number is like 70% of women who are active, their kids are active, right? So
Mm-hmm.
now, and the other piece we often hear when we're out covering events, we haven't done a lot of event coverage these days because a lot of stuff has been shut down. But
Yeah.
what we hear when we're typically out there is the impact of, daughters or children on their parents as well. What kind of impact has kind of Emily being active had on your life, Judy?
Well, honestly, anything that Emily has wanted to do her entire life is what she has gone out to achieve. She's never been shy. She's usually the first person with their hand in the air to volunteer or demonstrate. So I've always found her confidence inspiring, honestly. Um, she's a great leader, and so it's easy to kind of get caught up in her energy, and you see the group does the same, and they all kind of build off of each other, and that's just one of the great aspects of team sport. I mean, not to say anything against individual sport, because there's great benefits to that as well,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a uniqueness to a team sport that kind of translates to real life. And I think that shows in what Emily has achieved today. She's still very confident, still very much a leader. And so I just actually continue to be inspired by her. And when she texts me or calls me and says, "Oh, I have some exciting news," I'm never shocked, because there's always something new and exciting going on with Emily that just doesn't surprise me anymore. She's just so capable. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Amazing. Yay!
Thanks, Mom.
I was gonna say, that's so beautiful to see how, just to hear you even speak about how she has inspired and, impacted your life. I think often you're right, Tina. It's easy to we often just look at it the other way, but I think it's beautiful to see the younger generations, how we have, made a difference in our parents' lives. I think it's really beautiful and inspiring. And I agree. I mean, I have had just few opportunities to meet Emily and to just talk to you, listen to your podcast. But I feel like even in just listening to you, reading articles about you, even that one conversation we had, I feel like I feel that energy and I feel that confidence, which I think is beautiful. And just shows that it's something that is very much effortless and that very much comes naturally to you. You don't have to be like, hey, this is, I'm confident, I'm Emily. It's just like it exudes from just the way you speak, the way you articulate yourself. So I agree. So moving on to, you've done a lot. We've talked about that. You have a podcast, which I think is incredible. And I kind of want to touch a bit on how sport has helped build, these skills, this confidence, to be an entrepreneur, to, try new things, to, has, even was sport the thing that, or have you always been this way? Kind of touch a little on that.
So for me, I think it's 2 points. The podcast really came out of me still wanting to be connected to the sports world during COVID. I started it in May of 2020. And it also started because of my experiences in sport and recognizing that there is, at this current moment, especially in North America, there's no such thing as really sports equality. We can say there is, but I mean, in real life, in real practice, you talk to individuals, there typically isn't. So I think, to answer your question, Gina, sport has given me a lot of really great things in life in terms of skills. Being good at something does help boost your confidence. So, if I was good at Ringette, I felt good and I felt confident. You can translate that confidence into other things and be like, okay, well, I'm good at something. Maybe I can be good at another thing. In terms of skills to become a podcaster, I think sports just kind of allowed me to navigate this space naturally because it is a sports podcast, and I didn't feel like I had to really, really stretch outside of my comfort zone in that respect to get people to interview, to speak to them about sports and ask them about their sports. Because my coverage goes from, I mean, I did auto racing to skateboarding to concussions to rock climbing. Like, I didn't feel like I needed to really go out of my comfort zone to have a good foundation in that knowledge to ask people questions. But I think the biggest thing for me with the podcast is I just felt like I wanted to create something in the sports space using my knowledge, using my ability to put something together and put it out to the world in my network and give people the platform that is not being given to them at this current moment.
Absolutely. I think that's very beautiful.
Yeah.
Now, I was going to ask about your confidence, because I do think, even the most confident people have barriers and things they need to overcome, whether it's, the little voice in the back of your head saying, oh, come on, you really can't do it, or something that makes you nervous, but you step forward anyways. Have you had a moment in your life where you're like, oh, I don't know, but you were able to kind of, and how did you talk yourself into going for it anyways? Because clearly you go for it, right? But there must be, with every new thing, is there something sometimes that says, like, how do you evaluate that situation and get yourself through it?
So I've had lots of examples of this, but I think I try not to show that, and maybe that's why people think I have so much confidence. But one of the best examples of that I can think of, at least recently, was when I did my first play-by-play call for Radio Western. And what they managed to do with their broadcasters is they'll put you as a sideline reporter, and you'll do intermissions, and you'll talk to people halfway through periods, and you just have your little mic, and you run around the rink and try to find people to talk to. So the pressure isn't really on you. You're kind of like a entertainment piece for when the two main people aren't speaking. And then they saw how quickly I picked up on that and moved me to color commentary. So filling in the blanks for the play-by-play of the hockey game. So as the play is being described, if there's some lull in the conversation, then I bring up some stats and kind of paint a picture of what's going on the ice, because it's radio and people really can't see it. So there is a certain picture painting for that. But when they said, oh, Emily, we'd like you to do play-by-play, that was a little bit scary for me, because that involved a lot more effort, a lot more knowledge, a lot more skill that I wasn't sure that I had, because you literally watch the ice in front of you and you call out who has the puck in the split second that they have that puck, and what they do with that puck, and where the puck is, and who takes it from who, and who gets a penalty, and whose number is. And you really don't know the people who you're calling, because it's varsity hockey and there's always tons of different teams, and you don't follow it as much as you do maybe with your favorite NHL team and who they play against. But that
and you're not
day,
getting fed content, right? Like it's
no.
like you're having to do it yourself. It's
yeah,
awesome.
That's another thing. With local radio, as a volunteer, you do all of your prep, which does take hours of looking through stats and downloading rosters every single game that you cover, and like highlighting all the key info that you want to talk about over the 3 hours. So a lot of prep goes in. But the day that I did play-by-play, I was with my color commentator, and we were talking back and forth as the game was about to start. I felt good. We called out the goalies, the lineups. Then the puck drops, and I look at the play, and my mind goes completely blank, like wiped. I have never had a moment in my life where I didn't have something in my head to say, or something that was telling me to say something. But at that time, it's literally radio silence for probably about 25 seconds, or maybe it was 5, and my brain just went, oh my God, this is an eternity. But I looked at the ice, and I was like, and I think there was dead silence for probably about 20 seconds. But then once my brain started kicking in and being like, okay, it's all good, just start talking. Once I got that flow in, the key to doing play-by-play is actually to have your brain just kind of be on the sidelines. Like, you just let things happen, and you don't think about it too hard, and you just let it flow out of your mouth, and you make sure you check numbers and stuff. But once you kind of get into that flow, it comes a lot easier. So that was one of the most immediately scary things that happened to me. But once I got into it, fine, it was good. And I did it again, and I did it again. And that definitely helped build up my skills and my confidence in that specific area.
Wow.
That is amazing. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, commercial break. And when we come back, we want to probe a little bit more with Judy around what happened since she was 10 years old to right now with her ringette playing and how it's kind of led her into multiple different roles within the world of sport, but also within her own life, whether it's career or motherhood or whatever that looks like. So we'll come right back and we're going to jump right in with Judy when we do get back. So we can just pause for a minute. We'll be right back. This episode is brought to you by Francinelli Glusman Integrative Medicine. Are you feeling tired? I know I am. Sometimes overwhelmed and maybe even having trouble sleeping. Do you feel like you need a break? Well, Francinelli Glusman Integrative Medicine has a team of all kinds of experts, naturopathic doctors, massage therapists, psychotherapists, and exercise therapists, and they're going to help you achieve your best mental, emotional, and physical health. This great team uncovers the underlying cause of your health concerns, and then they provide you with recommendations that activate your very own body's innate healing powers for optimum health and wellness. During these unprecedented times, this is needed now more than ever. Find Francinelli Glusman Integrative Medicine at SeeWhatSheCanDo.com on our Athlete Advisor. Okay, and we are back with Emily and Judy Renneberg. We are talking about the joys of sport and the impact it can have on our life, and also how when we help each other, we can make this world so much of a better place. Judy, we want to jump right in and talk to you a little bit about the impact of sport on your life. We know that you started at a young age and you've held many roles in the world of Ringette, but we'd like to talk a little bit about the impact of sport and how it, why you chose to move into a leadership role and the sorts of changes you've seen happen over the years in that community.
Sure. So, I did start playing when I was 10. I got a flyer home from school. I'd tried all kinds of things like kids do, dance and soccer and baseball. Nothing stuck. So, got the flyer, had a couple friends say, I want to try this. My parents are from Scotland. They had no idea what Ringette was, so said, sure, okay, and started playing and loved it. It was immediately hooked and played for quite a few years, officiated as well. Took some time off to focus on school and then came back to it when I was 20. Started officiating and playing again, and then I rekindled that love and played right till I was pregnant with Emily, came right back, and then had my second child, had my son, same thing, came right back, but got involved in volunteering at a local level. I was hesitant, and it kind of ties into what Emily was saying. Sometimes you need to just take those first couple steps and realize that it's not as scary as you thought it was going to be and that you actually are kind of good at it. And so that's what I did, and my role grew from coach of Emily's very first team, which at that time the youngest age division was called Bunnies. So her first team was the Dust Bunnies, which is my favorite team name ever.
That's awesome.
Yeah. All the way up till when she was 13, and then went on to more elite teams, and I stepped back from there. But my role from there, because I was less involved as a coach, became more involved as an administrator. And today I wear several hats. I've chaired, like you said, the Essel Golden Ring for 4 years. I was also the chair for the 2015 Western Canadian Ringette Championships in Calgary. That was a pretty big undertaking. And then currently I am the facilities administrator and league director for Ringette Calgary, and I'm also the ice scheduler for Beauview Ringette. So really busy in a typical year. This year's been a little bit different, not gonna lie. Not as much to schedule when there's no sport happening.
No sport, right?
Yeah, but it's allowed us to kind of take a moment to take a breath and step back and look at why we do things, and should we just continue to do things in the same way because we've always done it that way? Or is this the moment to pivot? Is this the time to say, I think we can make this better? And I think we've started to crack that door, and we have some ideas, we have some plans. There's some really exciting stuff coming down the line. We're also kind of, we're learning that the world is a different place than it used to be back when I was 10. playing with sawed-off hockey sticks and getting changed in the bathroom because the boys are in the dressing room. And we're kind of, Ringette has been embraced as its own sport. It was created for women. We're super proud of it. It's almost like we own this sport, even though we do welcome boys and other non-binary identities. It's primarily a female-centered sport. So it's exciting to see the changes, and even I'm going to probably make myself sound very old here, but Emily got me into TikTok during shutdown.
Wow,
that's
impressive.
Yeah, I know. And I'm seeing all the Ringette TikToks out there, and I think, wow, it's just amazing to see that this sport isn't just here locally, because we do have quite a strong community in Alberta and Calgary specifically, but it's across Canada and nationally and internationally, and it kind of gives you a little warm spot in your heart that there's people out there that love it just as much as you do.
So have you seen, I mean, you've obviously watched Ringette from the inside grow. I mean, I heard, pre-COVID, the numbers were the highest ever in terms of registration for Ringette in Canada. Have you seen much of a change in terms of the game itself or the community? Like, how are you seeing this sport evolve?
It's amazing. There's a couple of pivotal moments in the sport that really changed it, and that was when they brought in a couple of big rule changes. Number one being they brought in shot clocks, which are 30 seconds to change possession or take a shot. We used to have some superstar players who could carry that ring for days and nothing would change on the ice. And then also the elimination, we used to have colored sticks that would relate to your position, and instead they play by zone, and they put in extra lines to kind of designate that.
Those are good for newbies, by the way, those extra lines, because
I
tried my hand at it a couple of years ago, which I love. I love those lines. I'm like, lines I get. That's what those lines are on my hockey ice for. Now I understand.
They're not actually called Ringette lines, but most people call them Ringette lines. So, so those two things drastically changed the sport, made it faster. You have to think ahead of the play. Because you can pass it ahead. It's not like there's offsides like in hockey. So it's passed from zone to zone. And it is called the fastest game on ice, not necessarily because we are the fastest skaters, but because the game is so quick. You are
beautiful skaters, I will say. I can tell the Ringette player that comes on to play hockey instantly. It's beautiful skating. And you're right, it is a fast game. I love it. I mean, honestly, we're grateful that our Ringette friends brought us onto the ice to try it. It's a totally different sport. And
absolutely.
I love the speed of it. It's just, it's a flow, right? It's really cool how it's
very
always
much
moving.
so.
You're not standing on a line waiting for something, you're moving.
Yeah, and that's something that through research that Ringette Alberta did, specifically that kids were looking for, is to be involved. Everyone on the ice is involved at all times, and they are. And we're finding that we have less attrition in the past few years. Like we're seeing less girls leave in the older ages, and we're also seeing a huge growth spurt in our adult leagues. So we know we're doing something right. We know that the sport is developing well. The community, the sense of community, Emily can speak to this. We've had some tragedies in the community, and the way that these teams and parents and players rally is like nothing I've ever seen, nothing I've ever experienced. And it really is a unique feeling that I think is driven because we are females. And we generally are a little bit more in tune in those ways. So love it. Can't say enough about it.
And because it's niche, I think, too. We take a certain pride in people who know Ringette because it's so niche and understand Ringette, and we feel good about that. So like, wow, not a lot of people have seen us. We've never been on actual TV. If you've seen it, you might have a cousin who played once, or you walked into a rink and someone was playing Ringette. So if you know the community, it's very tight because I think, A, because it's mostly women, but B, because we band together in our uniqueness.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that. So Emily, sport was kind of like Ringette was the starting point of a big reason why you said you started this podcast, right? Because you wanted to, open up a space to have conversations, but not only about sport, which is why, I mean, I think your podcast also does a really good job at including everyone. So I can be the first to say that I'm not a sport person. I love sports. I love active living. And I grew up playing sports, but it was not something I continued to pursue. But still, I love your podcast and I can relate. And I've listened to a couple episodes, and you do a really good job at just practicing inclusion, like welcoming a space to have conversations about difficult things. So I love that, sport was your starting point to kind of to pave the way to this, to making space for conversation about things. And you're really passionate about, you mentioned equality, which, can you just quickly touch on the title of your podcast? Even Strength. Can you just touch a little on that and where it came from?
Yes. So for those that don't know, Even Strength, the name of my podcast, is also kind of a nod to sports in general. It's like a little term you use in a lot of team sports. So it's kind of like a pun. So if you have a team, for Ringette example, 5-on-5, so you have 5 players on the ice versus 5 players on the ice with 2 goalies. If somebody gets a penalty and you're 4-on-5, then once that person returns and you're back to 5-on-5, you're playing at even strength. Nice. So it's a bit of an equality nod, but also a nod to the fact that it's a sports-focused podcast.
I love that. I love it so much. Very clever. So can you also touch a little on what it means to, to framing inclusion with intention and openness? You've mentioned that before. While also touching on like equality and your heart behind that?
So when I created this podcast, I knew that I needed to use my voice for other people. I started it with the idea of having the people in my network help me get it off the ground, which was fantastic. But I wanted to do that with, you said, intention, and I like to use the word intention because it is exactly what I try to do. So we know that 4% of traditional media covers women's sports, but then we look at that and say, okay, well, what is the 4%? Is it just cis white women? Mm-hmm. Pretty much. So for me, I think with my podcast, each episode features a different sport or aspect of sports, but I try to choose someone who was not necessarily represented in those communities in a way that they can see themselves. So I have had one of my favorite episodes. I had women's football with Olivia Ghosh-Slaby, and she is a fantastic person in general. She's doing her neuroscience PhD. She's rocking the world of women's football. She's really high up in the ranks and really trailblazing. But part of her experience is being a Black woman. Mm. So I want people to understand that, the equality doesn't just have to exist within sports. It has to exist within all of these complexities, and that's what we call intersectionality. Yeah. So for me, even talking with my podcast, I like to have an interview, but also have a script for myself to come in and talk and discuss. I've had a couple episodes where we talk about the fluidity of gender, how gender is a spectrum, and how the medical community hasn't acknowledged that for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And we talk about in my episodes, sports inclusivity, and about LGBTQ plus individuals and how they experience sports, coming out stories, and passive aggressiveness, and straight up rules against your ability to exist in a space. So I love that people can listen to my podcast and hear the stories of the people that I'm interviewing, but I also make sure that I am being open with the truth of the matter. So making sure that people understand that there are other issues going on, and that these are things to be aware of, and that you can make small changes in your communities or in your lives to help improve the lives of others around you. So that's basically, if I were to give a boiled down version of how I try and find people for my podcast, it would be to look for someone within a space, but someone who could speak to a little bit more than just that sport.
Absolutely.
It's amazing.
Yeah, that is amazing.
That's awesome. And Judy, what are your thoughts around, like, have you had any big aha moments around kind of inclusion and equity over, the last few years? I know it's it's often easier to say, oh yes, we believe in equality and inclusion, but to actually go out and do it and to put it to practice. Like, any big aha moments for you over the last few years around that, especially as an administrator in the world of sport?
Well, I mean, there isn't really a big aha moment with it. Like I said, the sport world has evolved tremendously since I became involved at a young age. But I find that Emily's podcast episodes have really shown me that there is a common struggle across female sport, where we're all struggling to be recognized as legitimate or good enough. And I think there needs to be less emphasis on comparison. Like women's hockey is not as fast as men's hockey,
agree.
for example. And instead, we need to embrace the uniqueness and the talent of these athletes in their own right. And really, instead of focusing on what we don't have, is celebrating the traction that we have gained and moving forward in that space. And like Emily said, in a very inclusive way, because we do the best we can with what we know, but we know better now. And that's something that we really should be moving forward with. And like I said, not just do things because we've always done it that way, which is the easy thing to do. Because the majority of sports administration, especially minor sports, is volunteer based. And we're all busy and we all have families and jobs and other things that, we'd probably rather be doing than looking at a inclusivity policy that is groundbreaking and probably kind of controversial in your particular sport for that moment because it's never been addressed before. So I think we have a real responsibility as administrators to delve into that uncomfortableness and work together to move it forward.
So I love what you said around, celebrating versus comparing. And in my eyes, even deeper than that is, it shouldn't need to be men versus women. Like, we have different sports and we play differently, and it's fun to watch both. But then the other piece too is, even within our own women's world of sport, to stop comparing sports. It shouldn't be hockey versus ringette. I mean, we play ringette because I'm a hockey player, because we've had ringette people on our team. So I got to experience the joy of both, right? We should be really working together to celebrate each other, regardless of our cultures or beliefs or physical abilities, whatever that may look like. But the more we can celebrate each other, the bigger our pie gets, and the more we can lift each other up and make an impact on this world, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think we often underestimate just the small changes, right? I know I can be one for that, where it's like, it's so small, but we don't end up doing it because we don't think it'll make a difference, or we don't think it'll have an impact. But something small, even within our group or our circle or our community, can make a difference and have a ripple effect, which we've seen with so many other things in history. So it's funny that we forget that, So, yeah.
Yay! I love, this is such a great conversation, and I love that, we have a kind of a cross-generational view that is cohesive and collective, because we all just want to make a difference in this world, and we're super grateful that you ladies have been able to join us.
Yes.
Before we end this podcast, we want to ask you a question that we've asked many of our guests over the last year in this crazy world of pandemic life. So we're going to give you each a minute to tell us, inspire us with what you are doing to keep yourselves moving, and whether it's from a self-care standpoint or just a physical activity standpoint during this time of COVID. We happen to have lockdown here in Ontario right now. I don't know what that looks like for you, Judy, in Calgary. Are you guys experiencing similar?
Well, we're not nearly as tightly locked down as you, although we are reverting back to previous state on Friday. So yeah, we'll be pretty locked down by then.
We'll be pretty locked down. Okay, so our world is a bit crazy right now, and we feel it's really important that we continue to keep our bodies and our brains and our souls nourished. So we'd like to ask you what you're doing during this crazy time to keep yourself healthy. And maybe we'll start with you, Emily.
So, Tina, to answer your question, I actually moved from Calgary to Mississauga about 3 months ago. So, finding things to do in a new city was the biggest push for me to still stay active. So, on weekends, I'll go on the Trails app and look up a good walking place, drive over there, and do like 3 hours of walking around and exploring my community. I think walking has been a big part of just getting to know the city, even though it's locked down, and I don't know anybody specifically in the city, but I can still experience nature and walk around on the trails. And even though I don't have mountains anymore, I can still appreciate what I do have. So.
Well, Ontario does have hills, and we do have lakes. In fact, we have 2,500 lakes.
Yes,
so there are many
that's
lakes
true.
that you can hike around. And if you're All Trails, it's my favorite app, honestly, to go out and just hike through. Milton has some beautiful trails like Rattlesnake Point and Hilton Hills, I think, that are not too far from you either. So, and you can always come over to York. Well, we're not supposed to be going to other regions right now, so I'm not going to say come over to York region right now. But within Mississauga alone, there's beautiful trails out
That's
there.
true.
Yeah. Awesome. How about you, Judy?
It's tough in the winter. I mean, Ontario experiences the same. It's tough to get outside. But when the weather's nice, I'm a big cyclist, doing a lot of walking. We're allowed to be outside with 10 people. So, reconnecting during COVID has been important. So I've been doing a lot of walking like Emily. But really kind of a silver lining for me in the pandemic has been a kind of a kindling of my love for yoga. And my studio has been doing the Zoom classes. So every day I'm in my yoga classes and really noticed a big difference in my practice and loving it. So yeah, that's been a really kind of a blessing for me.
That's awesome.
And all of those activities are mind, body, soul regenerating,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, awesome. Thank you, ladies, for sharing your time with us today. Honestly, it's been a real pleasure, and we're thrilled to see the impact that you guys are making in the world, making it definitely a kinder, more inclusive place, and really just chatting about what we can all do to support each other.
Yeah.
So, perfect topic for this crazy pandemic time, or any time in our world, really, but even more so now. So, thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, ladies. Great to be here.
Okay, have a great one.